Welcome to the Atheist Witch Podcast, a bi-weekly podcast for witches or any curious minds to learn more about a non-theistic approach to witchcraft. Welcome back to the Atheist Witch Podcast, the show for curious minds and witches who navigate a non-theistic approach to witchcraft. Today we're tackling a topic that's ripe for some spicy psychology discussion: superstitions. We'll be diving deep into how these seemingly irrational beliefs play out in the world, from everyday life to the intense arena of modern sports. Before we dive into the topic today, I wanted to take a quick moment to say thank you to everyone who's taken the time to listen to this podcast. And extra special thanks to those of you who've reached out to me with questions, comments, or feedback. I can't adequately express how much your support means to me. As you can all imagine, this podcast represents a fairly unique take on these topics, making it a bit of a niche within a niche. It means so much to me to know that there are others out there who find this content helpful, inspiring, or even just entertaining. So thank you for spending your valuable time with me, and I hope that you continue to find value here. I'm just as susceptible as the next person to superstitious thought. Rather than chastise myself for it, I've been trying to instead understand and harness these feelings. Case in point, my pendant. Like a lot of witches, I have a favorite amulet that I wear daily, and wouldn't you know it, but it just makes me feel a little better when I wear it. So I wear it daily, or when I need a little extra oomph. But importantly, I also make sure not to let it impact me over much if I happen to forget it, or if it just doesn't go with my outfit. What superstitions do you have? So, superstitions. We all encounter them, whether it's avoiding walking under a ladder, knocking on wood, or throwing salt over your shoulder. But what are they really? From an atheist witch perspective, these aren't driven by magical forces or divine intervention, but by our brains, our psychology, and our innate human need for a sense of control in an unpredictable world. Think back to our episode on science and witchcraft. We talked about how our brains are wired for pattern recognition and how our subconscious plays a huge role in our perceptions and our reactions. Superstitions often arise from this very human tendency to find patterns, even when there isn't a causal link. We experience a positive outcome after a certain action, and our brains connect the two, even if it's just a coincidence. And over time, that connection strengthens, and boom, a superstition is born. Now, where do we see this play out in a big, public way? Sports, of course. There's something about the high stakes, the intense emotional investment, and the sheer unpredictability of athletic competition that makes it a breeding ground for superstitious behavior. Let's talk about some common sports superstitions, and then we can break down the why behind them from a rational, psychological perspective. One of the most obvious examples is the lucky jersey or other piece of clothing or object. Did you know that the famous tennis player Serena Williams is said to wear the same pair of socks without washing them during a winning streak? How many of you out there have a specific hat, shirt, or even a pair of socks that you have to wear when your favorite team is playing? Maybe you don't wash it during a winning streak, or maybe you put them on in a specific order. This is a classic example of what psychologists call illusory correlation. Our team wins when we wear the jersey, so the jersey must be the reason, right? It gives us a feeling of agency, a sense that we're contributing to the outcome, even if, logically, we know that a piece of fabric has no bearing on a touchdown. It's a way to manage anxiety and feel more in control of something that we deeply care about, but ultimately have no direct influence over. Then there are the pre-game rituals. Athletes themselves are famous for these. The New Zealand All Blacks rugby team is famous for their pre-game haka, a traditional Maori war dance. LeBron James, a well-known basketball player, throws a handful of chalk into the air before taking the court, and some say this ritual was inspired by another famous basketball player, Michael Jordan. For these athletes, pre-game rituals involve consistency and the perception of control over uncontrollable outcomes. Performing the ritual creates a mental state of readiness and focus. It's a form of self-hypnosis, really, preparing their mind and body to perform at their peak. It taps into that subconscious memory we discussed, where a specific action or routine can trigger a desired mental state. If they associate that routine with past success, their brain creates a powerful link. Not to mention that for team sports, the pregame ritual can create a sense of cohesion, trust, and shared experience between teammates. Fans do it too. I've heard of people who have a designated game day seating arrangement on their couch, or who refuse to move from their lucky spot once the game starts. Some even have specific foods that they must eat, or a particular order in which they consume them, creating that perceived cause and effect chain. Last time I ate pizza during the game, they won, so I have to eat pizza this time. It's a way to feel involved and feel like their emotional investment has a tangible impact, even if it's purely psychological. Consider the language around it. We say things like, they jinxed it if someone speaks too confidently about a win before it happens. This taps into an ancient human fear of hubris, of angering unseen forces by being too prideful. In a non-theistic sense, it's about managing our own expectations and the discomfort of uncertainty. By acknowledging the possibility of failure, we protect ourselves from the full emotional impact if things don't go our way. It's a psychological safety net. Unfortunately, as you can imagine, sometimes these superstitions can have a negative impact, leading individuals or teams to feel anxiety and stress if the object of the superstition is unavailable or skipped. So, while the deep sense of belief can be used as a tool, it's important to remember that these traditions don't actually make or break the game. Speaking of traditions, let's talk about the history of superstitions beyond just sports, and how some of these beliefs have evolved or even been debunked. Many common superstitions actually have practical, if forgotten, origins. Take, for instance, the superstition about black cats crossing your path. In ancient Egypt, black cats were revered as symbols of good luck. However, during the Middle Ages in Europe, black cats became associated with witchcraft and evil, often believed to be familiars of witches or even witches themselves in disguise. This shift in belief wasn't based on any evidence, obviously, but rather on the prevailing religious and social anxieties of the time. Another classic is knocking on wood. While its exact origins are debated, one theory suggests it came from ancient pagan beliefs that spirits resided in trees. By knocking on the wood, you were either waking the spirits to ask for protection or thanking them for your good fortune. Over time, as animistic beliefs faded in many cultures, the act remained, but its original meaning was lost, becoming a simple superstitious habit to ward off bad luck after a boast. Now consider the number 13. Many buildings skip the 13th floor, and some people avoid Friday the 13th. This phobia, known as triskaidekaphobia, has various proposed origins. Some link it to the Last Supper, where Judas Iscariot was the 13th guest, or to ancient Norse mythology involving 12 gods and a 13th, Loki, the notorious trickster and bringer of chaos. Regardless of the origin, the fear of 13 is a social construct, perpetuated through cultural narratives rather than through any inherent bad luck in the number itself. As a quick aside, I find it interesting that to a lot of witches, the number 13 is important or even sacred, relating to the number of lunar cycles in the year and a number of other associations. Isn't it fascinating how context can transform something from bad luck to good luck? From a scientific standpoint, these superstitions persist because of what we call confirmation bias. If you believe Friday the 13th is unlucky, you're more likely to notice and remember negative events that happen on that day, which reinforces your belief while overlooking all the times that nothing bad happened. Our brains are incredibly efficient at seeking out evidence that supports our existing beliefs, even if that evidence is anecdotal or coincidental. Let's broaden our scope a bit and talk about superstitious thinking in general, beyond specific rituals or beliefs. This is about the way our minds sometimes lean towards explanations that lack empirical evidence, especially when faced with uncertainty or a desire for control. One aspect of this is the idea of magical thinking, where one believes that one's thoughts, words, or actions can influence the course of events in the external world in a way that defies the laws of cause and effect. While this sounds overtly magical, subtle forms of it permeate our daily lives. For instance, have you ever felt that if you really worry about something, it's less likely to happen? Or conversely, if you don't worry about it, that you're somehow tempting fate? That's a form of magical thinking at play, an attempt to exert influence over an uncontrollable outcome through sheer mental effort or the absence of it. This connects to what we discussed in episode 13 about locus of control. People with a strong external locus of control tend to attribute outcomes to luck, fate, or powerful external forces. Superstitious thinking often stems from this perspective, where individuals seek to appease or manipulate these perceived external forces. As atheist witches, we strive to cultivate an internal locus of control, recognizing that our personal power comes from within and our ability to influence our responses, efforts, and personal growth. Another related concept is the gambler's fallacy. This is the mistaken belief that past events influence future independent events. For example, if a coin lands on heads 10 times in a row, the gambler's fallacy would lead someone to believe that tails is due to be on the next flip. In sports, this might manifest as a fan believing that their team is due for a win after a losing streak, despite each game being an independent event with its own set of variables. This demonstrates our brain's tendency to impose order and predictability onto random processes. For the atheist witch, recognizing these cognitive biases isn't about shaming ourselves for having them, but more understanding how our brains work so that we can consciously direct our thoughts and actions towards truly effective outcomes. It's better to develop the skills to discern between a comforting psychological ritual and a belief that leads to unproductive or even harmful behavior. So how do we, as atheist witches or atheopagans, approach these phenomena? Let's not dismiss them as silly or irrational, but instead seek to understand the underlying mechanisms. Instead of seeing a lucky jersey as imbued with some external power, we understand that that power comes from the meaning that we assign to it. It's a powerful psychological anchor, a trigger for confidence and a sense of belonging. The beauty of practicing witchcraft as an atheist is that we can harness these very human psychological processes for our own benefit without needing to believe in external deities or supernatural forces. We can consciously choose to create our own superstitions or rituals that serve us. If wearing a certain color makes you feel more confident, wear it. If a specific morning routine helps you feel centered and ready for the day, embrace it. It's about understanding that the magic isn't in the object or in the action itself, but in the psychological impact that it has on us. For example, in our episode on rituals and spellcraft, I talked about how I use ritual to create a specific mindset. This isn't so different from the athlete's pre-game routine. Ritual allows us to consciously set the stage for our desired outcomes using psychological tools like visualization and repetition to influence our own focus and energy. Ultimately, superstitions, particularly in the realm of sports, offer a fascinating glimpse into the human mind's quest for control and meaning. By understanding the psychology behind them, we can appreciate their function for others and even consciously apply similar principles in our own lives, not as belief in external magical forces, but as powerful form of self-directed intention and psychological conditioning. That's all for this week's dive into the world of superstitions. Next time on the Atheist Witch Podcast, we'll be exploring another exciting topic from a non-theistic perspective, baneful magic. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep making your own magic. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, or leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow or message me on Instagram at @anatheistwitch, or email me your comments or questions at anatheistwitch@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.